Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, we are looking at a very strange case. Strange in that although the crime itself is heinous, shocking stuff, the motive behind it is even crazier. It might just be one of the most insane you've ever heard, so look forward to that. And you know, the little cherry on top is that it is set in Florida, so dead giveaway. Should have known. In 2003, a well-known doctor was getting on in years, but still a prominent psychiatrist who was well respected. All was well. That was until tragedy struck, and it would lead back to some people he'd worked with for years, and spiderweb out from there. There was a good few people involved, and it was so weird and wacky that it gets to the point where you're surprised the dog was involved in the plot. Please subscribe to see new true crime videos every week. Now, let's give it a go. Today's story takes us to Miami, Florida. The city of, something. You got the sea, you got the sand, the babes, what more do you want? Probably just a few more things, but you know what, let's just move past it. The year this story is set is 2003. The movies, that year, Finding Nemo, Pirates of the Caribbean, they're pretty big movies. 50 Cent's In the Club was the #1 song. I actually wanted that to be this channel's theme song, but who can afford the rights? The city of Coral Gables is where this story begins. Coral Gables may even ring a bell, the same setting for the Sutton family case I covered about a year back. They lived about a 10-minute drive from each other, and that story took place the following year from this one. Coral Gables, beautiful area, close to downtown Miami, but it's got its own little vibe. It's quiet, peaceful, some nice feckin' buildings, good for you, and the home of the University of Miami. As I mentioned, also home to kind of a startling number of insane murder plots too, so... Actually, you know what, thinking about it, this story has a lot of similarities to the Sutton family case, too. Namely because they both begin with a deadly home invasion. In 2003, Dr. Paul Jarrett was 82 years of age, getting on a little old bit. However, he was still going strong. He was a well-known psychiatrist in the area, really the go-to psychiatrist. He was originally from Indiana, had been the chief of staff at the psychiatric department at a Miami hospital, who was on all the psychiatry boards, president of some even, all that. Paul and his wife, Mickey, had 4 children together. Paul Jr., Aletta, Mark, and Greg. But in 2002, his wife had sadly passed away. These days, Paul ran his own private practice, and lived with his youngest child, Greg. Greg himself followed his father into the medical profession. He became a registered nurse, married, and had a kid of his own. Greg was 47 years old in 2003, and when he wasn't working at South Miami Hospital, he was off the coast fishing, his absolute favourite thing to do. Greg and Paul were pretty close, even winning father-son racing trophies together. So, having that close bond, after Greg ended up divorced, he decided to move back home to be with his elderly father and to take care of him. And they got on, extremely well. They were living in this beautiful area. They were both still, very active. And so, all's well until I get to the part of the story I'm about to tell you. July 16th, 2003 was the day Greg didn't show up for work. He was scheduled to work 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. that particular day, but by 7:30 a.m., He was a no-show, and so they decided, hey, let's try call him, see what the crack was, but no. All of the phone calls to Greg and to the Jarrett home, in fact, all the calls rang out. They called his girlfriend at the time, a woman named Monica, to see if she had heard anything. Was he staying with her? No, he wasn't. She hadn't seen him since the previous evening when he said he was going home to look after the owl fella. Calls to Dr. Paul's private office, speaking with the office manager, Maria Catabay, she said, yeah, he hasn't shown up for work neither. Uh-oh. Monica, Greg's girl, she eventually herself made her way to their home in Coral Gables, thinking maybe there was some kind of accident, something had gone tragically wrong. She knocked on the door and then actually opened it. The front door was open. Went inside. Eerily quiet inside that house. And so, having a bad feeling about this whole thing, she left. She called the cops. Police entered the home and, doing a full sweep, made a horrific discovery. Both Paul and Greg had been shot to death. Shot to death while still lying in their beds. Paul had been shot once, shot in the head. Most likely, and hopefully, shot in his sleep, died in his sleep, not knowing what was going on. In the other bedroom, Greg had not been so lucky. He had tried to get up, and in response had been shot 4 times. The house itself had been torn apart, a home invasion, 100%. Someone or some people had broken into the house in the middle of the night, trying to steal some expensive shit, and murdered. I mean, you could think this was a home invasion gone wrong. I mean, most home invasions don't happen when people are there. So maybe they'd broken in and didn't know anybody was home and so pulled out a gun, but they'd murdered them in their beds. This wasn't the burglars got surprised. This was they killed defenseless people. Now Monica, who had come to the scene, had noticed that although Greg's car was there, Paul's was not. So the police began to think that maybe the intruders had stolen one of the vehicles. So at least they had a lead. I mean, something to go off, and the bolo was put out for that car. It goes without saying, safe, upper class area, this doesn't usually happen here, certainly applies in this case. While they searched for that car, they continued to look through the house. Maybe they could find a motive for the crime by, what was stolen, yet didn't actually seem much was. Wallets and money remained. It did seem like they were looking for something, but the murders also seemed to be the point. There was also, apparently, no visible signs of forced entry, but then whether the Jarretts just happened to leave their doors unlocked remained unknown. Now it's important to note as well that both the victims here were extremely popular lads. Everybody liked them. They got on great with everybody. Paul, as I said, a bit of an ill fella, but he was very well respected in his field. Greg, a nurse, he was like the life of the party. So if this wasn't a random home invasion, it didn't seem like it could be anything else, like there was no motive, you know what I mean? And if anything in particular was missing, they couldn't find it. Although they did find Greg had a gun, and that gun was not in his little safe where he kept it. So a gun was stolen for sure, but it's not like they broke in to steal a gun, because the gun that was stolen was not the gun used to kill. It was a day after the investigation began that the police got something, which was good because everything else was coming up empty. They found Paul's car. It was about 15 miles from where the house had been, the scene of the crime was. It was parked just in the parking lot of some dry cleaners, kind of left out there in the open. Booty! The car was just like the house. No fingerprints, no evidence, wiped clean, you could eat off it. The car had just been left there, unlocked, keys in the ignition, as if the perpetrator was hoping it would be stolen and then disappear. All of this was really leading to police to think that whoever had done this, whether it be one person or multiple lads, they knew what they were doing. They knew their craft and they knew it well. And so evidence leading nowhere, you gotta go back and begin at the very beginning. The police began to look at the Jarretts. Although they were well liked, was there anything in their own lives which could lead to somebody wanting them dead? Monica was cleared relatively quickly. She had nothing to gain and she had lost a lot. They were planning on getting married. Paul, a psychiatrist, maybe he had a lot of patients. Maybe one of his patients didn't like how he was treated. Maybe he had an issue against old Paul and decided to sort it out with an iron. Who or whom, you tell me, knows. But looking in that direction, more broadly speaking at Paul's practice, that he ran his own private practice with Maria Catabay as the office manager, it did seem like something was going on there. Let me tell you, they found this letter in Paul's house. The letter was from his bank, addressed to Paul, and it was saying that there had been a number of unusual transactions from his bank account, his business's bank account. Essentially, the bank was alerting him to, do you know all this money is being made out and checks are being withdrawn, checks made out in the name of Maria Catabay. Maria was a long-time trusted employee, and in further correspondences, Paul had no idea why she was receiving these checks. She was being paid as she should be already. That only left one conclusion: Maria had been stealing from the business. Maria was interviewed, and she completely denied that it was what it looked like, embezzlement, that it was a complete misunderstanding, that Dr. Paul had already dropped the issue, no biggie. Now, the police initially didn't buy that, but it actually seemed like that was the truth. She had been caught stealing. She had been making out checks to herself from the company account. Paul had caught her, but she had worked with him for years. He didn't want to fire her. He liked her. And, she was coming out with all these sob stories like, she had a string of failed marriages, her home was going to be foreclosed, the IRS was up her hole, all this kind of stuff. And so Paul was like, man, I feel kind of bad for her, and as I said, they'd been working together for a lot of years, so he was like, you know what? He wasn't going to fire her, he wasn't going to press charges, he was going to keep her on, except, you ain't dealing with the money no more. So that seemed to be a dead end. And after that, things went quiet. Days became weeks. Maria, who was thought maybe she might have been into something, no, she was taken off the suspect list. Eventually, a couple of months would pass by, and more. Police were simply hoping that whoever or whomever who had done this double murder, they would just slip up. Because the police had really nothing to go. They were hoping that the murderers would incriminate themselves. They had shell casings, so hopefully the killer may use that same murder weapon again. But that was a hope and nothing more. If the killer was smart, they would have dumped the weapon. After a traumatic and tragic event like this, it's tough. And it was very tough for Roletta. She was the last remaining one. Both her parents were now dead. Greg murdered. Her other brothers had both sadly passed away also, one by a drugs overdose, the other in a car crash. And so, over 4 months after her father and brother's unsolved murders, she went back to the house she grew up in.
Hi, my name's Alita Jarrett, and I'm doing a video of my house. The reason that I'm doing this video is that the house is going to be torn down and I want to remember this house.
She wanted to film it as a memento and go through it one last time before it was due to be sold and torn down.
This is the room that my father was shot in while he was sleeping.
She went into that house filming it, as you can see, every single room, trying to embed these memories in her head, willing herself not to forget this experience, what these rooms looked like, what the light looked like, what they smelt like. She wanted to hold onto all of these memories strong. I'm sure we all know what that feels like when you're just willing yourself not to forget this very moment. She was going through all the items there. Anything she didn't take that had been her brother's or her father's would be dumped. She went through all the closets and the dressers, her father's items, her father's jackets. And then, in the pocket of her father's jacket, she found something. It was a piece of paper. A letter, in fact. That letter had not been found before. This was fresh news. And that jacket that the letter was found in was a jacket Paul had been wearing the day before he died. It was in the, inside pocket. The letter read like this. Dr. Jarrett, got your messages, but I thought it would be best to write this and give it to you before returning your calls. And I'm writing to you because I don't have the courage to say what I need to say to you in person. I have wronged you terribly, and I feel horrible. I don't feel that an apology would be sufficient compared to the damage I've caused. I would like to ask you to forgive me for my act of weakness, due to desperation. I dug myself into a pretty deep hole between my overdue real estate taxes and unpaid mortgage. In an effort to save from losing our home to foreclosure, I did the unthinkable. The letter kind of goes on and on and on, but that's the gist. So the letter, as you probably guessed, written by Maria, and when, given to the police were like, we already knew about this. This is a letter from Maria, written to Dr. Paul, admitting the embezzlement that she'd already admitted to them. The letter just goes on to say, hey, I'm so sorry for doing this, I did it at my lowest point, I'll pay you back, yada yada yada. Old news here. And so more time passed. It would be 8 months after the murders, in February 2004, that a real break would come. A man was arrested in an unconnected crime, but he had in his possession the murder weapon. The shell casings matched those found at the scene. What happened was that a confidential informant approached the police saying they were being recruited into a robbery of an armoured car, where they were planning on killing the guard. This CI was being recruited by a Ruben Fernandez and a Jose Barco. The plan was let go ahead, but it was a total setup, and both Ruben and Jose were arrested. It was on Jose Barco that they found Greg's missing gun, the one stolen from the house. And not only that, they found this gun, which had a silencer on it. That was what had been used to kill the Jarretts. So what was the link between the doctor and his son, and then these armoured car robbery lads? Well, under questioning, Jose admitted that both him and Ruben, along with another guy, Juan Carlos Fernandez, Ruben's nephew, had indeed been sent to burglarize the Jarrett's home. Juan Carlos Fernandez was dating Maria Catabay. All four were soon arrested for the homicides. What happened, my friends, was this. Paul wasn't too cool, as Maria had been explaining about her stealing from the business. But he still wasn't going to fire her. He still liked her, he still was going to help her out. But Maria, feeling so guilty over stealing, she wrote this big old letter, the one that was found in the jacket. She gave it to Paul. She's like, yada yada, I'm so sorry. But I hit rock bottom, I'll pay you back.
What did you do with the letter?
When I finished typing it, I left the house and I went to Mercy Hospital and I put it on his desk.
So that happened. Then Maria went to her boyfriend, told him later on that day, hey, Juan Carlos, you never guessed. I felt so bad about stealing. I admitted to it, and I gave him a letter.
What did he say about it?
He said that I should have never done that. That I should have just, if I wanted to just discuss it with Dr. Jarrett in person is one thing, but to actually put something in writing is another. And that I should retrieve that letter. That Dr. would come back and bite me. The next day I went to Mercy and I attempted to look for that letter.
In Dr. Paul Jarrett's office?
In Dr. Paul Jarrett's office.
Did you find the letter?
No.
When hearing this, Juan Carlos flipped out. He said, you were an idiot. You not only admitted to stealing, you put it in writing. That's no good. And so, they came up with a plan, break into the Jarretts, steal that letter back, and then there's no proof.
Mr. Fernandez suggests that you drive him over to the Jarrett house so he could obtain the letter.
Yes.
What was your response?
No.
Because?
Because I didn't want to be involved in trying to retrieve that letter.
So in an attempt to remedy this clusterfuck of a situation, Maria Catabay just threw more gasoline on the fire.
Did you also think it was important that you would...
Oh yeah, by that time I was convinced that I was going to cry for that letter.
Juan called his uncle, and Juan, Ruben, and Jose broke into the Jarretts. See, allegedly, they'd only been planning on breaking in, not hurting anybody. But then Jose and Ruben had other ideas, and they said, you know what, the much easier way to sort this all out. Kill him. They killed them both, thinking that would be easier than trying to find the letter and cover this up. And just to remind you, Paul was never going to press charges about this anyway, and Maria was not going to lose her job.
Mr. Barco
Yes.
is looking for anything about you.
Yes.
And Juan Carlos is looking for a piece of paper, my letter. However, Mr. Barco gets upset at the fact that there's nothing there, and he pulls out 2 weapons.
And guess what? After they murdered the Jarretts, they still didn't find the letter. It wasn't found. 4 months passed when his daughter found it in the pocket. Jose Barco was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Juan Carlos Fernandez pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Ruben Fernandez also pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 7 years probation. He was merely the getaway driver, and after they went in, he crapped his pants and he drove away, abandoning them. Hence why they ended up stealing one of the cars. Maria decided to go on trial for a murder she may or may not have orchestrated, but certainly happened because of her. She went on trial in 2009. The prosecution said she knew violence was a high possibility sending them in there, and regardless, as it happened because of her, she was equally as responsible.
We're here today because Dr. Paul Jarrett and his son Greg Jarrett are dead. And Maria Catabay is the reason for that. You are going to have to find Maria guilty of murder because these people died as a result of a burglary, the felony that she helped to arrange. But that's not all you're going to hear. You're going to hear from Lysandra Cordova. Lysandra Cordova was Maria's cellmate in jail when she was first arrested. And you're going to hear from Lysandra that her and Maria became very friendly and that they would talk, and they would talk a lot. And that eventually, Maria told her that the real story was not that they were ever going to go in there to get the letter, that Maria told her that she was so deep in debt. She was about to lose her house. She wasn't going to be able to pay the doctor back the money. She needed more money to be able to get herself out of this debt. And the only solution was to knock the doctor off. Either version that you choose to believe, you're going to have to find Maria guilty of both the murders and the burglary, because it's because of her, and only because of her, that this crime even happened.
The defense said she was a victim here too, kind of sort of.
The evidence will not show you something. It will not show you that Maria ever fired a gun. It will not show you that Maria ever went to the house. It will never ever show you that they have a tape testimony between J.C. Fernandez and Maria. It will never ever show you that. It will show you exactly what we've said to you today. That at best, she's a thief, but never a cold-blooded killer. It's a long way from that. Maria Catabay had nothing to do with Dr. Jarrett's death or Greg Jarrett's death.
You know, that she never wanted anybody to break in and steal the letter. She hadn't organized jack shit. Her boyfriend and the lads did that of their own accord.
I cannot justify it. I'm not going to try to justify it. There is no justification. I wrote a check for more than the amount that he owed me, and it was wrong. It was wrong. So when I was asked about it, I had to tell him the truth.
And how did you do that?
I didn't have the words to tell him because I felt horrible. I really felt horrible.
She said after she left the letter on his desk, the next day she went back to get it, but it was gone. Ooh.
Did you find the letter? No.
Now she was saying she did in fact go back and the letter was still there. She ripped it up. End of story.
And the letter was exactly where I thought it would be. It was on the desk along with the envelope that I had put it in. I ripped it up and I flushed it in the toilet. And he asked me, "Did you do what I told you to do?" And I said, "Yes. It's finished. There's no letter. It's gone." And that was it. As far as I was concerned, that was the end of the matter. The end.
There was no planned burglary because she didn't need to. She had the letter. Interesting. And so if she's telling the truth, how did the letter end up in Paul's jacket? Police corruption, of course. And also a cellmate of Maria's would come forward, saying that, well, actually murdering the Jarretts was in fact part of the plan the entire time. She never intended to pay him back.
So what did she and Juan Carlos agree to do?
He was going to hire a hitman. She gave him the key, the address, where the safes were. And he was to do it.
We, the jury, find as follows: as to count one of the indictment, the defendant is not guilty.
At the end of the trial, Maria was found not guilty of the murders, but guilty of the armed burglary. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison. And so ends the story of the Jarretts and Maria Catabay, and what is quite possibly the weirdest motive for a double homicide I've ever heard of. Although I don't even know if a motive is quite accurate. I mean, I can't imagine she wanted them both to be killed, so I can only imagine that when her boyfriend told her, "You'll never guess what we just did," she was only delighted to hear that. The whole story is insane. And do you know how much money she actually stole from the Paul Jarrett's practice? $9,000. That's it. $9,000. It seems that Maria knew Paul was getting on in years, maybe was not as sharp as he used to be, and so she decided to take full advantage of that. I mean, Paul, although not cool with her stealing, was not going to fire her anyway. It seemed like he had a soft spot for her. Whether Maria did in fact know that they were going to murder the Jarretts, I don't think she did, because to murder them for $9,000 is just insane. This whole story is insane though, so maybe she knew, who knows? Regardless though, Paul, after catching her stealing, he was happy to give her a second chance. At the end of the trial, the jury, not so much. She'll have her second chance in 30 years. Well, hey, listen, maybe like 10 years. That's the time of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Really means so much to me, as always. Hope you enjoyed this whole video. Please check out the That Chapter podcast, which has a new episode out every single Monday. If you're looking for some weirder, wackier tales, give it a go. And yeah, listen, it's gonna wrap this whole one up. So until I see you in the next whole video, which will be a couple of days as always, take care of each other and yourselves, because I love you. like it.